How was the process of dropping out of college? It is not very typical of Indian parents to allow it.
So the obvious question wasn't that you don't go to college or school. It was why do you go to it at the first place, right? I would not need a community of founders to chit chat with. I was like, people who are at the similar stage as me were not adding a lot of value to me. So I would typically make friends who were, let's say, a Series A, Series B company, so that I could learn from that and then go back and build my own business. If you're building it pre-ChatGPT, it can't be the same post-ChatGPT, which is to say, no matter how long ago somebody started, they're starting from the same line as you now. So it opened up some doors, but also created a lot of chaos for sure.
So after a few ideas, you got your first dollar, then what happened?
Then I made the rookie mistake. When you hire more people and you're trying to build SaaS, you realize that payroll and invoicing don't match. So then you don't have enough cash to pay the people you've just hired who quit their jobs.
So good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming on a Monday. I've also just come back from the US, still struggling with the jet lag. But we had very interesting founder today. Akshat, who's from Metaforms. And then we thought from our portfolio perspective and some founders who we work really closely with. Metaforms is one founder who is a very, very unique story. Especially very relevant in the world of AI and how things are changing and how he has navigated his company so far. So we'd love to bring Akshat today to talk more about his learning. Akshat, please join me on the stage. All right. Akshat, welcome. Welcome to the talk series on your 0 to 1 journey, and thank you for sharing or agreed to share your learning so early on in the process. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me together as being like an early partner. So super excited to do this today.
So when we met him for the first time, that's what all of us in the team thought, that, very young founder, college dropout, we don't know how we'll create an enterprise software company. What really made us believe in him was his energy, his focus on, at that time, creating a product which is more on the marketing automation side. I'll let him talk about it. So Akshat, why don't you start with the introduction? Where are you from? How did you come about even starting a company, right? Dropping out of college.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Manav. Really appreciate it. And of course, together as a fund as well. So hi, I'm Akshat. I was born in Ghaziabad, which, if some of you know, is on the outskirts of Delhi. I was actually building a small company. I was like 14, sold it to somebody in the US, made some amount of money. That gave me the permission to actually start skipping school a little bit. Then ended up writing a book with Penguin Random House. So did that for like 4 years. And I think that book writing process was the real education, which is to go through your own bullshit 80,000 words again and again. Teaches you to be more pedantic about focusing on the right things, making sure whatever you speak is actually verified and has some depth to it, and so on and so forth. So it was a lovely process. Did that for like 3 years of my life. After that, I was a part of a fellowship, which is called Rajeev Circle Fellowship. Some of you might have heard of it. From Rajeev Circle Fellowship, then I came to Bangalore. So I moved here just randomly because a friend of mine who was creating a company had also moved. So I moved to Kurmangla at a PG and then tried to figure out, took my first office in Sony Signal, just randomly trying to experiment and play around with a few ideas. And I think that's sort of where the story began.
But how was the process of dropping out of college? It is not very typical of Indian parents to allow it. So how did you think about the risk at that time? The reason I'm asking this question is, of late, what we have seen is a lot of college graduates or people who are in college, students in college are applying for business plans. And AI has opened a totally new realm, new world altogether. Risk-taking has increased in India as well, right? So how did you negotiate through that early part of your career decision?
Yeah, so I think the first part of it is like thinking through the decision of like formal education versus not. What was super intrinsic to me is like first principles thinking. So the obvious question wasn't that you don't go to college or school. It was why do you go to it at the first place, right? So when you figure out, hey, it's not adding enough value to you, the most logical decision is not to do it, right? So that was sort of one part of it. The second thing that I always believed in is like freedom is always won little by little. And with data points that you generate for people who are dependent on you or who you have a relationship with. So for instance, when I was figuring out the next steps for my own career, the fact that I had built a small company, made some money, proved to my parents that, hey, there would be some financial, independence for sure at the end of the day. And that I was writing a book also proved that intellectually I was engaged. Both of those things are typically what you worry about as parents. So I think just generating those data points created some reassurance. But beyond that, I think you got to do what you got to do. So you fight for it and you get it.
So in which year did you drop out of your?
I think it was 2019, 2020. Yeah.
No, you know, which engineering or which college did you go to? Where did you drop?
It's a very nondescript, like random college. So it was again not adding value. So it did not really matter.
I understand. And when you dropped out, what was the thought? What will you start? How did you find your footing on where you're going to start?
Yeah, I think I was never super interested in it at the first place. So it never felt like a moment, just very random. It was, oh, you attend some of it, but it's not delivering enough value that you expected. So the next logical step is you start doing other things. And I think a part of that was that fellowship I mentioned, which was Rajeev Circle Fellowship. I think that was a genuinely mind-blowing experience wherein somebody would give you $2,000 every month to do nothing. And it felt like so amazing, as in you was almost like grifting somebody without any strings attached. If you have that much money, I think how you relate to money also starts changing. So then you start wondering, hey, if my problem in life is not money, then what really excites me or what am I motivated by? So I think I'm super grateful that at Foundation, that time it felt like, oh, why are they even doing this in the first place? So the woman who runs it, her name is Asha Jadeja Motwani. So I was asking her also, why would you give people $2,000 without any strings? And I think the only perspective she had is, I want to make sure that when you have enough of it, you also want to give it away in the same manner. And surprisingly, so that fellowship has produced like quite a lot of people. So I know the founder of Pran is from the same fellowship. Posha, you might have heard of, it's from the same fellowship. There's obviously .ai. So all of these have been like top tier funded companies. That time it felt super random because all of us were super young. And there was like no way that, all of these people would go on to create companies, but turns out...
So how did you find Asha? How did you reach out to her? How did they find, or they found out?
Oh, just a Facebook comment actually. So she had posted about like some fellowship randomly and a friend of mine sent me the post. And I ended up commenting back and then connecting to her the same night on Facebook Messenger. This is, I think, quite a long time back. So like 6 years back when it was still being used.
Yeah, it's really, she's doing amazing work, and I'm really glad that has really helped you. Real life case in front of us. Yeah. So how did you use those $2,000 per month?
Not very productively. I think like when you are like 19, 20, the first time that you get access to money, there is some wastage for sure. Right? So you spend the first 6 months just recalibrating your relationship to money, which is to say the first 2 months, I'm sure you're going to spend it on all things you ever wanted, right? So you do all kinds of nasty things that you would like to do with money. And then once you sort of step out of that phase of knowing that you have enough abundance, then you start evaluating, hey, what do I really want? What is it for? And what would I potentially want to do and build with it? So I think that relationship changed over the course of 2 years.
So how did it change? So first, obviously, you went to all the material things, I guess.
Yeah.
So then what happened?
Yeah, after that, I started actually traveling. So that was the first time I came to Bangalore. And I started meeting some founder friends. They were building different things. I remember one of them was actually the Posha founder. So I think they were called Nimble at that time. So I met him for the first time. He was based out of Bangalore back then. Now they moved to the US. And he was building the home cooking robot. And this is still like sort of 5-6 years back. So he's also still in an early phase. And for the first time, I saw the degree of pedanticness that he had towards what he was building, and it was just mind-blowing. Similar to that, I met another friend, the founders of Joe Stock. They're also super close friends now. Surprisingly, both of these people became angel investors when he sort of started the company. But I met them, and they also, again, like super rationalized how I would think about life and go on. I remember one very nice instance wherein I was meeting this co-founder of Joe Stocks. And every time I would meet him, I'd like try to explain to him different things he was doing, like new schemes and all that. And he would ask me to talk in Hindi. And he's in Gurgaon, right? So he says, like, can you talk in Hindi? I'm like, why? He's like, whenever I talk in Hindi, I cannot lie to myself. And I think that was pretty mind-blowing, right? Like, so you realize that, in life, building anything or like doing anything is generally in the pursuit of truth. So just these people who were like super honestly working on things that they really loved, was an amazing experience, and I think fellowship allowed some part of that.
I understand. So you said 2-year journey of $2,000, right? So first year you came to Bangalore. Yeah. Then what happened with that? So
when I moved to Bangalore, I started sort of reaching out to random people for selling random things, right? This is also around the same time that ChatGPT or like GPT-3 actually was becoming a thing. So one of my friends at Georgia Tech had early access to it. This is like when access is still limited, like 1,000 people in the world, right? So he had access to it. So I had like an early preview to saying, oh, this is magical, right? For the first time, a machine talks back. Nobody knows what it does or what it's capable of or what business value it might add, but it's just the most fascinating thing in the world. And he was super playful around it. He went on to create another company, by the way, right? That was funded in the US as well. So I made friends with him. I got access to GPT-3 as a result of that and started playing around. And then used that to start pitching different solutions to like random people in India. So I remember the first guy that I was reaching out to was a HR tech company based out of Mumbai. He's still like a very close friend. He heard us out and so on and so forth. None of it made sense. But I think 3 months later, he called back and said he had some other random project that he wanted some AI in. And he thought that we would be nice people to work with. When I say we, it essentially meant me and one guy that I just hired. So when I had moved back to Bangalore and I had some cash, I ended up hiring this engineer who used to work at Genesis. His name is Siddish. So now he's a founding AI engineer. He's still with us. So I ended up hiring him. And it's super surprising to me that he took the bet on his career as well, right? So he quit his comfortable job at Genesis and joined me in the Sony Signal glass cabin. And together we started pitching random things to anybody who would buy. And that's where like we started getting some revenue in. So started getting some validation. And for the first time, it started feeling anybody would pay me $1 for selling software. And that was like super surprising to me as somebody who's never done SaaS or never done software in general. And then we took the next few steps from there.
I have just out of curiosity, most of the people at your age, at 19, you said you got $2,000 a month. You don't feel like traveling the world, explore more. What really motivated you to go towards, meeting founders and figuring out you want to start on your own?
Yeah. I think like initially, I'm sure there's some fascination with travel, with like material things and so on and so forth. You can only do this for like a little while though. But if you're super honest with yourself, you very quickly start questioning what would I like to do next or what is truly interesting to me. And what I have at least discovered for myself is the most truly exciting thing for me is to build things and then to feel fulfilled with that. So I guess like even if I would not have $2,000 a month, I would still gravitate towards the same versus with money.
So just being honest with yourself, basically.
Yeah. And I think I've also figured out that truth seeking has become like an important part of the journey in general. So like when I was writing the book as well, I keep going back to that because there also you're trying to be very, very honest about what you truly believe in. Until you are able to have that deeper inquiry with yourself, it becomes very difficult to like do anything in general.
Got it. Understand. So after a few ideas, you got your first dollar. Then what happened?
Yeah, so then I made the rookie mistake. I hired more. When you hire more people and you're trying to build SaaS, you realize that payroll and invoicing don't match. So then you don't have enough cash to pay the people you've just hired who've quit their jobs. So you start having tough times. And we had just moved to a newer office, which was a beehive cabin in Koramangala 5th block. So we had now 3 more people apart from me. We had customers. So I think that was always very fulfilling. So when we were building software, we made sure that somebody bought something, no matter what it was, why they were buying it or whatever. But we needed to have customers for us to feel like this was a real company. So we had 3 teammates and some customers, but the maths wouldn't work. And I think that's when we came to you.
So how was the experience? So pitching, of course, the first time to a professional venture capital firms, right? So how was the experience?
So initially, I think some of our friends, like the few founder friends I had met during the fellowship, had known a few other friends. So we could get some word out into the VC world. And like I had chatted with some of them. What was most life-changing was a DM from Shivam in our team. Shivam had texted me on LinkedIn saying, hey, we heard that you guys are trying to raise money. And I met Shivam in Araku. And I think we just hit it off. It was amazing. Shivam was very delighted that I would just keep talking. So it felt pretty fun and exciting for me as well. And from there, I think we went through like a full diligence process with you folks. Shivam spent a lot of time at our office, meeting the 3-4 teammates that I had, talking to all of our customers. I think I remember traveling to you in Whitefield as well. So together also did not have an office that time.
Yeah, like you were also born in COVID.
Yeah. So I think like what also really resonated for me is like we were also growing up with you. So as the fund was being created, it felt really nice that you had the same sort of, hustler energy as us as a company then.
Yeah, you are making us look good. That's what it is. So that's why we are here. So I think what I was trying to get is the learning for most of the founders who are very young in the college, right? So how would you explain the experience to them, and what time should they raise capital, right? If you pass on the learning to somebody who's 20, 21, either just graduating or 2 years before graduating, they decide, or he or she decides to start a venture. So at what stage they should approach a professional venture capital firm? Should they raise a family and friends round first?
Yeah, I think I have a very fundamental view to this is you only raise capital when you need to. So at least I did not think that I was going to raise capital when I was starting this up. I would have not been excited about doing that either. It's just that when something started to work for us, which is we got some customers, I had some teammates, and the inflection point was not being able to match the payroll and invoicing, right? When that happened is when I knew that I needed some money in order to be able to build things going further. But I don't think there's a scientific metric for sure, which is, can you raise at seed, pre-seed, and so on and so forth. What was also clear to me is by the virtue of my background, you would typically not give me money if you were using the usual signals, right? So I do not come from a pedigree college. I've not worked at a SaaS startup before. I've not worked at any startup for that matter, right? So there's nothing in terms of signals and heuristics for you to bank on, which is, I think, fair when you are, as a VC, evaluating deals, right? That meant that if I had to ever raise capital, we had to furnish enough data points again. It's very similar to the story of like when my parents would let me do this, right? I had to generate data points for them to bank on. So we were very clear that if we were to ever raise external capital, there have to be enough proof points for somebody to believe that we would be able to build a large enough business. And I think once we got some of those customers, something started to work is when I felt comfortable enough to raise. Maybe people from like different sort of background might have a slightly different perspective and journey to it.
And AI is so new, I think the backgrounds do matter, but in the way it doesn't matter also. It depends on what work you do. That's what we believe in. That's how we came together with you. I think I was asking the perspective question. A lot of people are going to YC or EF. You didn't think of going to any accelerator, any such like that?
Yeah. I think a part of the company building process is also discovering what you enjoy and don't. I have typically not enjoyed social settings a lot. What that means is I've never been excited about these community of founder forums, right? Maybe they work well for some people, but I think part of that truth seeking is also, hey, what do I truly enjoy? I like being independent, which is why like when I started off, it was a solo founder, right? I would go ahead and do this anyways because that's what was truly exciting to me. I would not need a community of founders to like, chit chat with. In fact, I found that a huge waste of time, to be honest, in the beginning. I was like, people who are at the similar stage as me were not adding a lot of value to me. So I would typically make friends who were, let's say, a Series A, Series B company so that I could learn from that and then go back and build my own business.
I understand. So the name of the first name was WorkHack, right? Remember, that's how we came together, right? So, okay, after you raise capital now, and so what happens next?
Yeah, so we raised capital and then, of course, some of the problems around invoicing and payroll got solved. But then we got a new problem now, which is you have money, but fundamentally you are doing a lot of incoherent things, right? So you don't really know what's the right abstraction to build a solid company out of. And this is all happening in the background of ChatGPT also growing up. So I think I remember the time that we signed the term sheet, 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, ChatGPT came out, right? So again, it seemed like previously you were building something and suddenly the world has changed massively between even the funding round itself. So it was very clear to us that it's not possible to build like a company in this volatility. You will have to do a lot of discovery. So no matter who you are, what kind of business you were building before, if you were building it pre-ChatGPT, it can't be the same post-ChatGPT, which kind of creates an equalizer also, which is to say, no matter how long ago somebody started, they're starting from the same line as you now. So it opened up some doors, but also created a lot of chaos for sure.
So what was the first idea and what was the pivot after that?
Yeah, so we were very excited about data collection. I don't know why, honestly. I can rationalize it a little bit now, but that time we were just excited about data collection. And the artifact for data collection is generally forms. When we started building AI forms, what was exciting to us is because it could touch multiple industries. So the learning could be much faster versus building a very isolated product, figuring out it doesn't make sense, pivoting to the next one and so on and so forth.
And I know that, we were discussing about Typeform at one stage and say, okay, you want to compete with them, the AI version of Typeform, right? You started with that. So then at what point have you realized that you want to now move on and, progress in the idea a little bit more?
Right. So while we were excited about forms, a few things were clear to us. Forms are a very PLG product, which means that now you have to have, millions of forms published using you as a platform in order for you to make significant amount of money. And if you start doing maths, something doesn't add up, right? So we started knowing that we needed to verticalize at some point of time. Verticalize in what? We did not know. For that, we needed enough people to create enough forms on the platform. So once we started having like 20,000 forms on the platform, we started asking a deeper question about who's finding greatest value and how. And one of those segments happened to be market research agencies. And that's what we started to go deeper into.
Yeah. So, see, typically pivots is the life of a founder. It's a normal thing, especially in AI. It is very, very common, right? So how do you really decide that this is the idea you think you're going to spend money, time and effort going deep and deep? And why it is not just one more pivot and let's do one more pivot after that?
Yeah, I think it's always difficult to answer like where the urgency comes from. But for us, the urgency was coming from like fatigue as well, which is for, let's say, 1 year we've been doing forms, but there's nothing substantial coming out of it, right? Because also it's PLG, it's not going to create, ARR very quickly to the degree that you can be really proud of. It was also not going to create critical dependence on a business, right? So it's not like people cannot change their forms. They'll definitely like to change it. Was it becoming defensible? Not really, and so on and so forth, right? So if you're truly honest with yourself again, you would see that something is missing in the story. And to fill that story's gap is what you start to like think about all the time. So we were constantly paranoid and like restless about the fact that, hey, this doesn't go anywhere. We have to make the hard choice of moving to the next step. And around the same time, we also realized that, the team would also get very restless. Nobody likes to work at a company that's not winning. So some of those factors, I think a combination of it really forced us to draw a line. That was around September last year, is when we said, hey, enough of this exploration and horizontal, form making. Now we have to truly go deeper into one of the verticals and build a critical business. The other thing we understood about ourselves is forms is a very crowded space. We would not like to build in a red ocean. So the only kind of company we would want to build is extremely monopolistic in nature. It's also going to be larger enterprise contracts only. It's also not going to be something that you can replace tomorrow. So it has to create such a fundamental dependence for another business that it would become a critical infrastructure for them and so on and so forth. So when we started discovering the things that we would like versus the things that we were doing today, it again created more and more compulsion to be like, hey, when will we take the next step, which would make a lot more sense.
There's one interesting insight I want to bring about you. So you are not a typical tech co-founder, right? So how did you keep track of changing tech trends, especially GPT-3 to then GPT-5 now, of course. So how has that journey been while you're pivoting? You also needed to understand technology. So how did that come from? Where did that come from?
Yeah. One, like super grateful to like people who've been a part of that journey. So like our founding engineer, Siddesh, he's still with us. He was the primary AI engineer. He's been one of the most scientific evaluators of different models and different orchestrations as well. So we were really proud to make sure that there was somebody, unlike just experimentation, could make real judgments about what was working and not. Second, I think my co-founder, Arjun, who joined us along the way, he's also a super composed, measured scientific man, which also dictated that every time we were evaluating problems, we were having a very open discussion about what's working and not.
Got it. Understand. But did you read upon technology on the way, or you just depend on Arjun and Siddesh or your co-founders to understand technology?
No, I think you have to know it for sure. So we spent some time. In fact, the company culture also became like very curious. And
the reason I'm asking this is to actually pass on the learning to the next generation of founders, that if you're very young or if you're anybody starting up, right, how do you keep abreast with the technology changes?
Yeah. I think two parts to it. One is the company culture itself became like super engaged and intellectually charged for sure, which is to say we are genuinely curious people, and all the activities that we do actually revolve around understanding, learning more, etc. So for instance, like any new book that comes out, the company actually keeps it on reception every day.
So give me an example. What are the last week's books?
So last book, would sound funny. There's a book called Mother Mary Comes to Me. It's by Arundhati Roy. It's a very beautiful memoir about her mother.
So now coming back to your story. So now you've focused on a vertical, right, which is market research. So now your typical 0 to 1 journey started, and you are not from enterprise background. You haven't had any understanding of, or at least experience of selling to enterprise, right? So how was your thought process at that point in time? That is now if you go back in time, I think you spent about a year and a half in pivoting, right, to various businesses and figuring out, okay, I have to go more vertical to be able, and that's what you like doing as well. So now you are in Jan of 25, that's when December 24, Jan 25 period, right? Which is 18 months after you started your company, where you are now pretty much clear that I want to build a market research automation focus on vertical, right? So you come to that point. So now, what were the first few thought process, first few steps from there?
Yeah, so in September is when we drew the line at market research agencies, right? Again, we had no idea what is going to be the product here. But we were very sure that this persona seems most excited about forms. This was again in September. So in October or so, we realized that the market research agencies did not have a forms problem. They'd already signed multi-year, multi-million dollar contracts with forms providers. Because if your business is that, I'm sure you already have providers. And then we also started discovering these are not Google Forms and Typeforms or even SurveyMonkey for that matter. There's a very specialist breed of survey hosting software that they're using. And we understood that the market research forms are way more complex than anything we could have ever seen. Yeah. And maybe before I go into the product, just differentiating between a marketing agency and a market research agency. A marketing agency is the one that you, of course, run ads with. A market research agency is the one that gives you insights around who should you target, what should be the packaging like, what should be the optimal pricing for you to make the most amount of money, what should be the form factor of your product, should it be a sachet or a pill, and so on and so forth. So every large corporation in the world would typically use a market research agency to be able to make these decisions. Again, we knew nothing of this when we sort of made that judgment in September. In September, we just made the call because it seemed the most excited person to work with. Now I can rationalize it a little bit more.
So that's what most of the people struggle with, right? So most of these domains are very, very deep. And typically you need a domain expert to solve the problems, and then technology can enable it, right? And you are kind of an outlier from that perspective, where you are not from the domain and not also from technology, right? So what techniques or what hacks do you use to understand?
Yeah. I think more than knowing which is the right choice, because all of them are bad choices only, I could have picked healthcare and then talked about it. I think what is super important is to know what do we want to do. So just coming back to that point, right? We wanted to enter a space that had large spending, of course, because that's what you need to build a large company. Market research is about $130 billion in global spend, ticks the box. We wanted to enter an industry which did not traditionally have software adoption. Market research agencies, by the virtue of being agencies, do not have a lot of software penetration, ticks the box. We wanted to enter a space which did not have a lot of players. Because I have to explain what market research agencies are, you can see why not a lot of people would wake up in the morning and be excited to do market research operations automation. So there were very few people or actually no players who were substantially large doing this problem statement for them. And I think fourth one, the most important, is you need somebody excited enough to work with you. So I think these four were the ones that we found within market research agencies is why we made the decision, which is while we were sort of going through that forms journey, me and my co-founder were again learning what do we like and not like. And one of that was, hey, we do not get so enamored by, $500 million in ARR. What we get super enamored by is $1 paid by somebody who loves us really a lot, right? And that led us to the discovery of we would not want to sell to a mass of users. We would like to sell with this one guy that we can look into eyes of and persuade this is the best decision they could possibly take.
So I think that the learning is that cold calls and cold emails do work.
Yeah, but I think they also work in a specific domain though, right? So we were selling to market research agency. That's the persona we have picked, right? A market research agency owner or the head of operation would not receive the similar number of, AI operations automation emails as would other personas.
So how big was the first contract?
Decently big actually. So the first one was like I think so $60,000, which again to my like 23-year-old mind is like super astonishing, right? Why would anybody pay us $60,000 to sell software licenses for like very few users? So I was again discovering that enterprise is what I truly enjoy doing. And then I started stretching the limits of it, right? So I think, our largest contract is like, 10 times or even 20 times larger than this initial contract.
Which is $1 million contract.
Yeah.
Oh, in January of this year, right? So how much time it took you from January to get to $1 million contract?
It took us about 5 months.
5 months to get to $1 million, right? And you almost started practically with 200K ARR in January, I guess, right? I remember we were discussing the pipeline and how things are making. So from here to now, what is the journey for the year looks like?
So we are targeting upwards of like $5 million, and I think we should be able to get there. That's again as a result of the predictability in this particular business segment. Ours is a very finite universe of customers. So there are 3,000 agencies in the world. 300 of them are decently large. I have to sell to 300 of them for sure. I am closer to selling to about 50 of them. And if we do the maths, it makes it very easy to get to that goal for us.
What are the key elements of US GTM that you will build now? If you look at it in the past also as Indian companies or Indian born companies have been thinking about how do you scale the US GTM. So have you, I know it's a bit early for you. Have you thought about it? Are you going to move to the US or you think you're going to build from here?
Yeah. I think, again, super specific to the customer segment that we operate with. If I have just 300 people in the world that I need to convince to buy Metaforms, GTM looks very, very different. What we also discovered is because this is only 300 people, the word of mouth is super strong. So for instance, today when we speak with like $1 billion plus revenue enterprise as well in our segment, they would have already heard about us because the job role is so finite that the people who now work at this company have already worked at the company that I've already sold to. So the job of converting a customer becomes so much easier.
That means you will also turn profitable much faster.
Yes. I think I was just telling you that before our current hiring, we were actually net positive even 2 months ago.
So see, legacy market is the largest market, total $2 trillion enterprise software market. SaaS penetration only about 54%. So $1 trillion is still left in old enterprise legacy software, and SaaS itself is now kind of old, right, in terms of AI. So I think, and then there's new workflow which is coming. So the massive market in the legacy software market. I'm glad that the company from India is focused on boring legacy market where you can make tons of money and also grow. So that's really amazing.
And again, the part of discovery for me has been it's so delightful to give these users of legacy software new experiences, right? So the bar for them is extremely low in the sense that if you just look at the user interface, it's so badly built and never renewed in the last 30 years, such that if you start offering them even very mediocre levels of UI UX, they're just mind blown that there is autosave in it. Right? So we started discovering some of these quirks, which made the job much easier. And that's the kind of company we always wanted to build, which is like more built around criticality versus, just like lipstick on the horse.
No, it's wonderful put it, and amazing journey. I think 0 to 5 in 12 months, and then clear path again. I'll say congratulations. And with that, I would open the questions to audience. I'm sure a lot of people want to ask you deep questions on how you actually go in building a business. So questions, please.
Yeah, hi, Akshat, hi, Manav. I mean, just listening to your journey itself was quite instructional for me personally. And thanks a lot for the questions. They were also very resonant. Again, my question that I have is, the way you moved from data collection to forms, to market research, to survey programming, to ROI establishments, right? That itself is very enlightening for me. But my question is a bit more upstream and at a very early stage of a startup, right? Like, say, if you are just someone who has a really good idea, and and you have, it's a problem that I've been facing, and I really want to solve for that problem. Knowing all that you know about, based on your experience of writing your book, which also is very interesting, I guess. And number two, everything that you have learned from your entrepreneurship experience, plus all that you know about market research. How would you recommend a startup solopreneur go about doing his market research or validation of the idea? Because for now, I know what my data collection, something that's analogous to your data collection. I know what that is for me, but given LLMs and everything, like how would I go talk to my customers, or how do I carry out market research given all these tools? Like, would you have any suggestions for that?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. I think two parts to it. I personally do not index a lot on personal experience. While I understand that's important for sometimes, let's say, consumer startups, at least for B2B SaaS enterprises, at least I believe Metaforms' first and foremost commitment is to make largest sum of money in the shortest possible time, right? So I think first you find that versus to index a lot on a personal problem that you experience. Maybe for a consumer company that makes sense because to deeply empathize with your customers and sort of go deeper into your own experiences and so on and so forth. So that might vary a lot from consumer to SaaS for sure. In terms of just the market research tooling, I can recommend you some of our customers who now use AI workflows to deliver faster results for sure. But what we also believe is potentially there are enough of these DIY research platforms which would take this manual process and convert into software.
Hi, lovely to meet you. My name is Smita, and first thing that came to my mind when I heard you, thank you for sharing the story, is Outlier, and I'm so impressed that you've managed to achieve what you have, and you guys for funding him. As you told us your story, one question that came to mind, and maybe you've already answered the question to your funders, but for me, was what's your moat? Because you're in a legacy software space, clearly incumbents with huge budgets. You've said one of the founders.
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. I think the most fundamental moat that I believe in is sustained excitement for the most boring problem. That I think is super rare in general in companies. And I divide it into two kinds of players who might potentially sort of want to build things, right? One is the existing players. The really interesting thing about this space is they're only people operation companies. So agencies are people operation companies. They're not actually software companies. There are no real software companies within the segment who might potentially decide to sort of build something similar to Metaforms. The billion-dollar company that I was mentioning, Fosta, is a survey hosting platform. No surprise, they tried to build this feature 2 years ago. It doesn't work because, of course, when you get to $1 billion in revenue, you're also PE owned. When you're PE owned, you don't have an excited engineering staff who actually cares for their customers. So what we've also discovered is the players who are somewhat large in this space and let's say provide some legacy software are not the most excited to build newer things in general. So the kind of approach that they have taken typically is to actually partner with younger companies like us, and that's what they're doing now, to actually solve problems for their customers because they do not think that the business would massively transform, in the next few years. The second sort of stage of competition that I think of is like newer companies who would be similar to us who try to do this. At a very fundamental level, again, I believe if somebody does a better job than us, they should win if they're good people. So I would love for newer companies doing similar things as Metaforms to actually do well as well. But I think it's such a deep, niche, boring problem that you would really, really have to wake up in the morning and be like, today I will solve for SPSS, which even IBM doesn't care about since last 10 years.
Thanks, Akshat. This is really insightful. And thank you once again for sharing your learnings.
Thank you so much for having me.